Om Nam, Om Nam, Om Nam, Om Nam. Thank you very much. And this time, I'll briefly talk about the Four Noble Truths and also a little bit of the Noble Eightfold Paths. As you may have seen the previous 3 occasions, we are touching subjects of which books have been written, each and every single one of them. We don't do that. I do not give hours-long explanation on each of these subjects. What do I need to do? I just need to get your attention to these subjects. Then you do the rest of the work. Okay? If you have these concepts mature into wisdom inside, you have done the job. If you do not practice and do not ripen these concepts into wisdom, that means you have only cognition. We call it dry cognition. Okay? And this dry cognition cannot help you. That's why we say, understand the very basics, and then practice and attain your true self. And when your mind is clear, then even Buddhism becomes clear. Your life becomes clear. So how does suffering become clear? First of all, when we see, like we said previously, that because of impermanence, impurity, and non-self, not existing by itself, we suffer from this world, we suffer from existing like this, then it's the notion of suffering. We simply realize that something's wrong. We don't want to die, but we die. We don't want to lose our beloved, but we lose them. We don't want to be in the company of those whom we dislike, but we are still there. So this is the notion of suffering. It's a major disharmony, dissatisfaction, which we experience. Okay? So, the fact of suffering is something that we see in this room pretty easily because we are dealing with it. We bring our attention to it because that has been our intention. However, outside, in the world, many times people don't even realize that they are suffering. They say, something's wrong with the world. The world is not correct. I am correct. Okay? So that means they blame somebody or some other people. They blame the world because they exist in the way they do. Okay? That's a very important point. So realize that there is something in you which we call suffering. Some people don't even get that far, their whole lives. Okay? Then if you found that this major discomfort is called suffering, then you can find the cause of suffering. We talked about that earlier. There's the 12 links in the chain of dependent origination. Okay? These 12 links are very important, and we talked about the first, ignorance, which is dualistic thinking. Okay? Or the lack of this clear mirror, one mind. When you lose one mind, ignorance appears. So that's the major fundamental root cause of our suffering. And everything else, the other 11, follows. So, suffering, cause of suffering. Now, end of suffering. That's very interesting, okay? Because the Buddha found that there is an end to suffering. So when you stop making opposites, when you stop creating attachments, when you stop holding, attaching, wanting, checking, judging, okay, then the suffering can stop. You can put an end to it, okay? Then, the way to end suffering is the Noble Eightfold Path, which all begins with correct. So, correct view, correct meditation, correct livelihood, correct energy or correct effort, all that, okay? But one thing is really interesting here. Every single part of the Noble Eightfold Path begins with correct. How do you know what's correct? Okay? The first time I read it in my life, I said, wow, this is very interesting because this doesn't sound like an ideology, okay, or like a religion. In ideology or religion, they always tell you what's correct, okay? They always tell you, this is correct, this is not correct. If you are a human being like this, you go to this and this place, okay? Then you're a bad person. If you are a different person, then you go to another place, then you're a good human being. Here, no. They just said, correct, 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 correct. So moment to moment, if you keep your mind clear, then this correct also becomes clear. Okay? Then you can take away the dualistic world, your dualistic thought, and then you attain the end of suffering, which is before birth, before death. Before good, before bad. So before your thinking appears, before dualism appears, before attachment or suffering appears, that mind. Just now, as you hear these little sounds, moment to moment, without thinking, this mind. When you meditate, you immerse yourself in this. You let go of any unnecessary thought. Then this moment, just now, becomes clear. That's our treasure, okay? Nothing else. Your body have to return to the 5 elements, okay? Your ideas, your thoughts, all go away. Everything is impermanent, but this moment, this clarity, never, okay? That's our treasure. So, you may ask why the Buddha started with the 4 Noble Truths. And the answer is, he didn't start with this. As tradition recalls, he started with what we know as the Avatamsaka Sutra today, which says, if you want to understand the nature of this universe, then perceive it as created by mind alone. But when he started to teach this first to his 5 ascetic friends, they didn't understand. Why? Because it was too short and too simple. Too simple, too clear. So he had to open it up and make it understandable at the level where we are. Because everybody understands impermanence. Everybody understands conditioned existence. Okay? Soon or later, we come to realize that we exist as per certain rules of life and death, how life and death operate. Okay? So, when he saw that many people just did not get it, then he started to teach the 4 Noble Truths. And he was teaching basic cause and effect as if it existed outside of ourselves for many years. So he says, there is suffering. There is the cause of suffering, end of suffering, and the way to end suffering. But if you practice and you truly attain your true self, then you see that you create your own suffering, you create the cause of it, you create the end of it, you go on the path to end it. Okay? So originally suffering doesn't exist. Originally the cause, the end, and the way to end it also don't exist. But he had to start with something which we directly understand, immediately. Okay? That's a very important point because later on you see, as we get to next week, the Mahayana scriptures, that the Mahayana scriptures are almost against the Theravada, but it's not an opposition, it's an evolution. It's a necessary evolution, just like you grow up from child into adult. So it seems that the 4 Noble Truths is really profound, which they truly are. But the truth of the matter is that it's really the starting point. It's really the starting point, something like the 4 corners of a table which stands very firmly on the floor. But then, more steps, more steps, more steps, and then you get back to the original point where suffering comes from, where enlightenment comes from. So that was the Buddha's very important job, to make this very clear, very simple truth. First, understandable, then attainable. Okay? That's why in Zen we say, understanding cannot help you. It's true that intellectual understanding cannot bring you enlightenment. It's just an intermediary phase. Okay? If you transcend that intermediary phase and you enter the practice of meditation, any kind of meditation, if correct direction, can bring you attainment, okay? Not just Zen, many other styles. So, if you can do that, then you see later concepts as just suitable vehicle, some kind of skillful means or help. But when you start out, you really need them, and you don't have to deny that you need them. So, when you have this really interesting intellect, like a hungry dog wants to eat words, eat meaning, and churn concepts, okay? And then poop out some wisdom. That's the correct function of your mind, correct function of your intellect, okay? Don't deny that, but go beyond that, okay? So understand who is the owner of this dog, who is the owner of this thinking mind, okay? So that is very, very important, because by then, as you understand it and attain it, you become truly mature human being. And mature human being means perceive where suffering comes from, what's the cause of it, what's the end of it, how is the way to end it. That means mature, okay? At first, we follow ideas. All of us do. Maybe Buddhist ideas, Zen ideas, other ideas, because we don't know. So we need some guidance. But if the teaching is correct, then you don't stop at the conceptual level. You don't stop at some conceptual relative truth. All of this conceptual study just helps you to go beyond thinking, to attain this point. Because when you hear this sound, there is no thought in your mind, at least for a split of a second. This is a demonstration of no thinking mind, which is beyond opposites, because you don't create that. At least that moment, when you hear the sound, your mind stops creating opposites, stops creating anger, desire, and ignorance. Okay? But how do you keep that mind? How do you cultivate that mind? A shout, a finger, a hit, they're only expedient means. They're not really the truth. Okay? How do you keep that when you talk to your friends, or you teach English, or you do your everyday life? That is the question. And that's why this kind of practice, which is directly pointing to human nature, is really helpful. Then you attain. When you attain, you can use this life and your death also correctly. That means human. 100% human. Okay? So, I would like to invite questions at this point on any aspect of the Theravada, which we have expounded so far, on the Four Noble Truths, on practicing, anything. So the floor is yours.
I have a question about, when I was younger, I had a strong sense of pity for people. I found it was very strong. And when I grew up, I started working with people that I pitied, or that I felt I pitied. But I couldn't sustain myself doing this work because I was getting angry. I was feeling like I wasn't being thanked, or it was becoming too much about me. And I was wondering how I can cultivate a real sense of compassion from this sense of pity. That
Very good question. Very good question. So when you have some kind of compassion, that opens the world for you. And you find these people and these people find you. But if you hold on to any kind of I, then your life will be poisoned by the suffering of other people because they don't appreciate you enough. So you can and you should do two things. First of all, take away this expecting I, this expectation ego. Okay? Why? What they say is not so important. Of course, good relationship is important, but if they don't appreciate you, no problem. But if you cannot help them, that's a big problem. So if you help them, then you already reduced the amount of suffering. That's number one. Number two, if they truly understood that, they would appreciate. But many times you do the job and they don't see it. And if they see it, they may not appreciate it. Bear with it, okay? You are complete even without appreciation. Next, try to go deeper in your practice. Not just take away this expectation or expecting I, but also take away emotional attachment, because that's the root of it. You're attached to some kind of emotion, some kind of pleasant emotion. And as long as you are trapped in there, that karma controls you. And that's a hindrance. Then you cannot help those people who hate you. Okay? But in some situations, you must try that, because there is no other way. Okay? So if you can only help those people who love you back and appreciate you back, then your clients will become very small group soon. If you practice, then have this clear mirror consciousness. You already understand. Suffering people come, help them. That's very good. But in return, don't expect anything. That's number one. Then, as I said, you go deeper, and then this emotional imbalance which causes this kind of suffering disappears. Then complete. Okay? More questions?
When we talk about suffering and pain, I can see, as you pointed out, that much of it is recreated by our own thinking, the thinking the wrong way. But at the same time, because we have this consciousness, we call the feeling or whatever, like basically the physical feeling. When I receive some stimulation, I definitely feel the pain, whether it's imagination or no imagination. I still feel the pain. So how do you deal with about this pain?
When pain, only pain. When pleasure, only pleasure. Don't judge that pain is bad, pleasure is good. So sometimes you go to the doctor because you're sick, and the doctor gives you a shot. Then this big syringe and needle appear, and then people start to shake. Hey, the doctor is there to help you. So what's wrong? I don't want pain. I really don't want this to, enter my body. No, that's childish mind, but still adults. Many adults have it. Okay? Attain who feels the pain. Attain who feels the pleasure. So that's the next step. What is it that experiences the pain? What is it that experiences the pleasure? Okay? Okay? So, Zen Master Majo was very sick, and somebody asked him, Zen Master, how has your venerable health been lately? Then Majo says, oh! Okay? So it's very clear. He was sick. He totally attained sick. He didn't have any problem with that. But if you reject pain, then your death will be very, very painful. So don't reject it. Go through it. Pleasure also. If people are attached to pleasure, then soon this pleasure turns into suffering. Everybody understands that in this room. Okay? Everybody has experienced enough that when you overdose yourself with your own pleasure, you suffer so much. Okay? So, take pain as pain, pleasure as pleasure, and attain who feels that, who experiences that. Okay? Then you attain liberation. More questions?
You talked a couple of times about us not wanting death, but it seems like there are also people who want death. Will you talk about that a bit?
Yeah. Wanting death is equally wrong. It's an I. Usually when people want to die, they want to put an end to their problems. If they truly understood the nature of life and death, what is it that goes into a new body? We'll talk about that next week during the Mahayana section. We will devote much time for that. But if they truly understood, they would not want to kill the body. They would want to extinguish their thinking, which causes them the suffering. So when people want to kill themselves, let's call it that way, then they have this mistaken notion that because of the body, they suffer. And that's totally wrong. Okay? Those people who go through physical hardships, even torture, or they are taken to forced labor. Millions and millions of people experience that, even in this country, Asia, Europe, America. In the last 100 years, just count how many millions of people went through it and survived. Why? Because their minds were unbroken. So they could survive that, all these physical hardships. Reverse, when the mind is broken, even when the body is very healthy, very good, useless. Okay? So then this kind of broken consciousness wants to destroy the body because mistakenly the person believes that the body is the cause of the problems. So what's really important, that if you meet a person who is suicidal, you have to point out in one way or another that you work on the same thing. You also want to kill the problems. But you don't want to do it in the body. You want to do it in the mind. So kill the problems in the mind, because if you kill the body, then the mind's problems just go on and on and on. Okay? So they have to come to the realization of correct cause and effect. And of course, they will not understand reincarnation. They will not understand, this kind of continuity, but they understand car and driver. Okay? Everybody understands car and driver. So if you have a problem because you always make an accident with your car, then do you take the car to the junkyard and say, this is a bad car, I want a new one because that will be better? Already understand, okay? Everybody already sees it. The problem is with the driver. It's not with the car. Okay? So fix the driver, fix the mind. Then any kind of car, no problem. No accidents. So when these people, suicidal people, they really want to put an end to themselves, then they want to put an end to their suffering. And then they are really in the Buddha's realm. So outlining to them clearly what is suffering, what is the cause of suffering, what is the end of suffering, the real end, not what they think it is, the real end of suffering. And what's the way to end suffering? That's our big job. And if we practice, we can do this job very successfully. Okay? But if you don't practice, then you will not use the right words. You will not use the right thoughts. Then you can make things worse. So let me emphasize, repeating the words of the teaching, sometimes worse than not saying anything. You must attain the real meaning of the teaching. And then you can use the words of the teaching correctly. I have to caution everybody for that. Okay? And helping in many ways is very wonderful. But if your mind is not clear, you can do more harm than good. That's why the Buddha said, as I mentioned at the beginning of this series, attain enlightenment and help others. So in our lives, becoming clear means we practice day to day, moment to moment. Then our minds become clear. You don't have to wait for the big flashlight, because sometimes it never appears. Enlightenment is not bound to a certain phenomenon, okay? So becoming clear moment to moment in your own simple daily life and daily practice, that's number one. And with that kind of mind, you can help other people. And that's very valuable. That conveys this real human quality, which I have started to explore during the last, series, and hope to continue with the next series, next week, to which you are all invited. And at this point, I have nothing left to say but appreciate your precious attention, your keen mind, and hope to see you next time too. Thank you very much.
이 프로그램은 더불어 사는 즐거움 전동 휠체어 전동 스쿠터 전문 업체 JS 홈쇼핑 협찬입니다.